Pitter patter, let's get at her. Welcome to the Toronto Real Estate Podcast. Today I have the queen of acquisitions who's talking about listings and some of the sales she's had working with Fox Marin clients over the last little while. And I also have my partner in crime, the super smiley, the effervescent, voice, the heart, the soul of Fox Marin, Kori, here to join us as well. Hi, Kori.
Hello, hello.
And today we're going to look at some of the properties that we've sold over the last month. Not all of them, but a little smattering, just again to give context to what's actually going on in the market. And as you know, some of the media is very dire about what's happening. It is important to remember in the month of July, there was close to 6,000 some odd transactions. That means that there was 12,000 people who engaged in transacting in real estate in Toronto/GTA. So there are properties selling, and we're going to go through some of the ones that we've sold, the good, the bad, the ugly, in terms of what we went through to put these properties to market and get them across the finish line. So hopefully you find this interesting. And Kori, I'm going to put this over to you, and why don't you take it away?
Okay, I love this conversation, and I love that we can give color and context to these case studies because oftentimes we don't get to hear what happens behind the scenes. And whether that be the scenario, the pros, the challenges of the property, how long it was really on the market for, why the seller is selling, and what kind of things they're navigating in terms of having listed it before possibly, or they're on a challenging floor of a condo building, or they're in a very difficult position on a street, or they're competing with lots of other properties. I mean, there's just a lot of context when it comes to these successful sales. So I thought it'd be helpful to start with a condo, just because condos have just had such a bad rap in 2025, and there have been a lot of amazing success stories. And I want to focus on this one to start with. So this one's located at 1029 King Street West. So for those of you who just want to have a quick geography lesson as to where this is basically at the corner of King and Shaw. And it's across from that cute Starbucks that's been on Shaw Street forever, with the best barista at Starbucks in the city, I would like to add as well. She's always been there and always so nice and amazing at what she does. So shout out to her. And I actually lived in this building at one time in my life as well. So I'm familiar with living there, obviously familiar with that Starbucks. And it's a great building. And the reason that this building is wonderful is that the maintenance fees are all inclusive of utilities, which is very rare and very helpful for buyers looking at condo product and wanting to really budget. The building is super dog friendly, so all sizes are loved, near and dear. Also, it's just really well kept. So when you walk the property, you go through the exterior gardens, the hallways, everything is just super well manicured and clean. And for an older building, it's just really well looked after. So there's some really strong aspects of this particular condo. So here you can see that we are selling this lovely 2-story, 1-bedroom, 1 washroom. It's located on a corner, as you can see from the photo here. It did have parking, it had a locker, it also had an EV charger, and it was on the 2nd floor. So we're going to talk about the 2nd floor and views in just a moment. I just want to highlight the fact that our sellers in this scenario were amazing. They have wonderful style. They keep their condo in immaculate condition. I mean, the drawers, the closets, the tiles, the grout. It felt like a brand new condo in there. They also were very design-centric, so they had a bit more color and splash than a lot of condos typically have, which I think just helped elevate and make this particular condo stand out. And the other thing I want to mention is they had this beautiful fig tree that you can see on the main floor here, which is the seller's fig tree. And she has been looking after this baby fig since it was just a little guy and helping it grow to that height. And so it actually extended all the way up beyond to the 2nd floor. So you just had this beautiful sort of abstract plant piece of art, which I think just really helped the condo stand out in photographs alone. And in fact, the buyer ended up wanting to have the fig as an inclusion in her request. But of course, our seller was very attached to her baby fig, and we did not include it in the sale.
And we had another sale with a fig tree involved as well. Yeah.
yeah, that one stayed, but it wasn't a
Yeah.
fig, something else.
Oh, I thought it was a fig.
No, it's
I
not a
think it
fig.
was.
Ralph, we're really not good at our horticulture names.
No.
We
But
know that.
but let's go with fig tree anyways.
Okay, let's do that.
Thank you.
So we listed this property on July 8th, and we listed for just under 700,000. So to give you context, this condo was just under 800 square feet, so less than $1,000 a square foot. We had to be really aggressive with pricing on this particular property because just before we went to market, there was 4 other lofts in that building that were listed for sale. And this lovely couple had already listed their property last year around this time. And so this is their second kick at the can. So for them to make the transition that they wanted to make, which was to move up the property ladder from their condo up into their first low-rise property, we had to be conservative with pricing, we had to be aggressive, and we had to be aware that we are competing with other loft inventory, not to mention the other 7.5 months worth of condo supply in the Toronto market as well. The challenge with this property, and every property has challenges, is that it was on a lower floor, as I mentioned. It was on the second floor, and it also overlooked the intersection at King and Shaw. So you didn't have the best views. Now, there's many advantages of living on a lower floor. For me, I personally love it. You never have to take the elevator. You can walk up and down the stairs. It's almost like you have your own personal private entrance, and you're not having to deal with the elevator wait times that you would if you were living in, let's say, the 40th floor of a building with great views. So we were definitely challenged with the lower floor, but also happy to address that with anyone who came forward with an offer, knowing that we might have to make some concessions due to the fact that it was on the lower floor. We ended up getting 2 offers on this property. One, which was like a super low ball, ridiculously low offer on it, like insulting offer that we tried to make work on the property, and the thing died pretty fast. But then a few short days later, we received a really solid offer from a wonderful buyer agent, very experienced and tenured, understood comparables, understood where the market was, had the perfect buyer that needed something with a quick close, and came in aggressively on price and very short conditional period as well for a due diligence period. And we were able to sell this property in just 15 days at 99% of the list price. So our pricing strategy was on point. Our marketing was on point for this, and the seller's ability to collaborate with us on all of these things, inclusive of price and expectation, completely on point. The other things I wanted to mention, just in terms of getting eyeballs onto a property, really important here, is that beyond the MLS and your House Sigma app and Realtor.ca, we really want to try to leverage as many of the marketing tools that we can as possible, especially in a market right now where things are not selling themselves. So on this particular property, this Instagram reel alone in this short marketing period had over 27,000 views. It was forwarded to friends 45 times. It was saved 36 times and got 135 likes. But in addition to that, the Instagram post, so like the album, the carousel album, got over 37,000 views, 277 likes, 43 forwards, and 729 interactions. So showing that the static content can just be just as relevant and important as video. Facebook, we got over almost 19,000 views on the Facebook ads, and the campaign produced over 1,800 website clicks. So oftentimes we'll see with our social media campaigns that we'll get more eyeballs on the property leveraging social media than you will if you simply have it posted on realtor.ca/MLS. Finally, just to finish off this case study, the main things that were the big wins was that it was beautifully presented. The clients had fantastic taste. We just went in there and did some extra styling. Everything was pristine. The fact that it was a 2-story loft made it a differentiator between your typical cookie cutter property or something on one level. As I mentioned, it's a great building. Maintenance fees are all inclusive. The pet-friendly part, massive parking, locker, EV charger. And then what else did I want to tell you? Oh, the last thing I want to tell you is we had 27 confirmed showings on this property over the marketing period, which is actually very good for condos these days if you want to have a temperature check on how you're doing or a pulse check. And as I mentioned, we got those 2 offers, one low ball and this one strong offer that got these clients across the finish line. Anything you guys want to add to this?
Yes, this actually performed really well, considering it basically was in or is in ground zero of condo Armageddon. It's a smaller unit, one bedroom or one plus den. So it's in that target zone of really, really struggling, and yet it did quite well. And so not all condos are not selling. There are a lot of condos that are selling. And it's one of the things that was a theme for the summer for us, anecdotally, experientially in the market, where we have seen condos, albeit at lower prices, significantly lower than where we were at peak. We're starting to see, in our experience, condos in terms of activity and interest in sales starting to outperform low rise. So is this a trend, or is this just something that we've seen over the summer? Time will tell, but I do think it's important to note that we are seeing an uptick in condo buyers, first-time condo buyers, and the activity right now seems to be skewing a little bit more towards the condo and away from freehold, which is something we wouldn't have predicted end of June.
It's so true. Like I remember when we were prepping all of our summer properties between the three of us, we thought all of our low-rise properties were shoo-ins. Like I wasn't even worried about those. And those are the ones that had a more challenging time. And these condos, and we're presenting one more for you today, a condo townhouse, they all did really well and sold with pretty swiftly. So it's just very interesting. I don't know what that actually means for the fall, but it is interesting anecdotally, 100%. Jess, anything you want to add about this building or this particular property?
I think the one takeaway here is that this property was exceptionally well presented. And I think it really highlights the need to invest that time and capital and energy into making sure that your properties look beautiful at a time where most agents and sellers are scaling back. Because even though there are active buyers out there, they're very, very picky.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so in order to get them across the finish line, you really have to alleviate any and all objectives and reinforce that emotional connection. And I think this is a great example of that being achieved because the property was beautiful. And even though it had its challenges, I think that a buyer was able to overlook them based on the way that it was presented. And I will tell you that to find any property in the city that has been meticulously well maintained is so difficult and is a value add in itself. And it's something that I really highlight, especially with my freehold buyers, because a lot of properties have lipstick put on them when they're being presented on the market, but you can always tell when a seller has really taken the time to maintain that property throughout the duration of their ownership period. And that will permeate into other elements of the home. And it just gives you an added layer of assurance that that property is going to be handed over to you in reasonable condition. And that's huge for buyers right now, especially if they're doing this for the first time.
That is such a good point. And it's so true. You can totally tell when there's pride of ownership. And it's the small things like the grout, the baseboards, the utility room. Is there junk around the furnace? Like, how tangled up are all of their wires? Like things like that, you can really, really tell. And I know in this instance, and the sellers, just the most adorable people ever, when they closed on the property and passed the keys to the new buyer, the buyer's agent texted me and was like, whoa, they left this condo so beautifully for this woman's buyer, for the future owner. And she just sent a note with gratitude to be like, this never happens. And I'm like,
Oh, it never happens.
Of course they did. I'm not surprised at all.
If we could write a 5-star Google review for our clients, in this instance, we would.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
We would. And the one last thing I want to say about this property, because I thought it was just kind of an interesting story, and again, anecdotal, is that we did have somebody interested in the property, but that was concerned about its location to the intersection and if the property would be able to get dark enough at night for sleep. And because the agent lived out of town, Ralph and I actually went over there. And because it was like July, the days were so long. So I think we had to like go over there like 9:30 at night to make sure it was dark enough to film what it felt like inside the condo at nighttime with the blackout blinds closed to ensure that this possible buyer feel like it was sleep appropriate. The lighting being dark enough, being close to the intersection. It was hilarious. We're like filming around with our iPhones. Everything's like dark. I'm like, does it feel dark in here? I think it feels dark. Oh, it's funny. Anyways,
And-
you got to go above and beyond.
Yeah, these are
sure.
all things that we're doing in 2025, which we never had to do before.
Yeah, totally. Ralph, what were you going to say?
Oh, yeah. In 2021 or 2022, it would have been sold before they could have even requested us to have done that.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Completely true. Okay. Well, let's move on. Let's go to case study number 2. So this property is 26 Forsyth Crescent. So this is located in C10, which is like Mount Pleasant East area. Mount Pleasant East and what would be my intersections here, guys? And Davisville. I think that's kind of a good way for you to get an understanding of where this property is geographically. This is a semi-detached 2-story home, 3 plus 1 bedrooms, 3 washrooms, a finished basement, and it was on a smaller lot, 18 by 93. However, big point here is that it's a pie-shaped lot. So in the back, it spanned out to be quite lovely. So you actually had a wonderful backyard. It had a mutual drive with 1 parking spot. And the mutual drive on this property was actually functional, meaning if you have a car, you could actually use your driveway and actually park your car while your neighbor's car was also there, and both of you would be able to get in and out of your parking spots. This property had been newly renovated, and I think a couple of highlights I want to mention off the top is that the seller did a very good job working with his team to select finishes that really speak to today's audience. So you can see here just swiftly in the photos that the palette was like really creamy, lots of neutrals, black accents, lots of gold, this mushroom colored kitchen. Like it just had a very luxurious feel about it, even though the footprint for this property itself wasn't huge. So it was just executed really well. In addition to that, it's on a little crescent, which just is really adorable. So it's on a very inviting crescent off of Davisville, which is very notoriously known. I think Toronto Star even wrote an article about this crescent at one point about how it's very in demand. And the reason people want to live in this Midtown location is because the school district is top notch. And this particular property would be considered to be, and please don't judge me in the comments, entry level for the low rise sector in this location. And I know when
that location.
I know. And
not
I know
for the city
exactly. So
or the province or the country.
yes. And I'm not suggesting this is affordable by any means. We're just preparing ourselves for the comments. I'm not even suggesting that at all. Other things I want to talk about. Oh, the other thing that was really great about this property is when we collaborated with our stagers, I just think that they were so on point with this particular property with the execution of their furniture selections that I think just really spoke well to the color palette to begin with and just elevated everything. So in this case, the marketing looked amazing. The photos were gorgeous. The staging was gorgeous. The finishes were beautiful. Everything just worked out really well in terms of how it presented on and off screen. And Ralph and I spent a lot of time working with the seller as well, who also was just amazing. Talk about being open-minded to all of our ideas. Like we just had the best conversations with him, called him up on the daily with so much feedback about this property and the direction that we wanted to go. And he was so receptive to it all, which just made the process so much easier. We knew that we should do an offer date on this property because it's a high demand location in the high demand school district. But we also knew that we didn't want to list too high, but we didn't want to list too low. And we also know that it's summer, and summer's a little bit unpredictable in terms of traffic and getting people in there to see the property. So we decided to be quite conservative and list at 1,449, knowing that was less than market value, but still not too far off from our goal or target pricing or range of pricing. So what ended up happening is we ended up getting on this particular property 56 net booked showings in a week. That is a lot for 2025. So I would say like right now, I'm like usually happy with like 20 showings a week. Seems like a good gauge, depending, of course, on the property and location. But 56 net booked showings in a week is a lot for Toronto right now. And then we had, Ralph, you did the open houses, 75 plus people at the open house.
Rammed. They're rammed. Rammed. It felt very reminiscent of 2022. Now, it's summer, the weather's great, lots of people walking around, nosy neighbors. So can't say that there was a ton of qualified buyers, but there was quite a handful of buyers who came through who were working with agents who'd either seen the property and wanted to come back a second time, or were going to come back and book a showing and just wanted to check it out. So there was really good activity, more so than I was expecting. And it felt reminiscent of another time, another world, another market in Toronto real estate. So it was interesting to see that level of activity and enthusiasm at an open house, which is something I hadn't seen for quite a while.
So tell us a little bit about the buyer profile at the open houses. What was the age demographic? Like, tell us
It was
a little
hilarious. Everyone was either just married or just having a kid. It was just right in that range. And people would come in. I go, let me guess, you guys just got married? Or they would tell me that they're having a kid, because I would never put that out there. But it was always just one of the two. So it trended very young. Felt like mom and dad were somewhere in the background involved with making this all happen. But everyone seemed to have pretty good jobs and seemed to be very targeted on this location. And I think for me, what was really exceptional is if you look at most of the streets in this area, they're very busy. They're always drive-throughs between Yonge or Mount Pleasant and Bayview. And so because this was tucked away with a really interesting backyard that had great potential for garden suites, which we had a garden suite study done, it definitely was attracting a lot of attention. It was definitely on the smaller side. And I think that was the challenge for some of the people coming through. But the level of renovations and the amount of attention to detail really, really spoke to people. So the feedback was very, very positive.
I totally agree. So there was a lot of positives about this property. The fact that it has, again, there's going to be a theme. It's completely turnkey, with the exceptions of the roof and the windows. And for those of you who are renovating out there, when you don't do those, if you've done everything but some things, you'll always see the but some things stand out. So I think, Jess, you walked through the property, you could really notice that the windows were not new because everything else was so fresh. The other positive thing about this place is that it had a powder room on the main floor. And that is such a coveted thing.
And a closet.
And a front hall closet.
Those two things are so incredibly rare in Toronto real estate. If anyone has gotten out there, even if you saw a handful of properties, you will know that if you have a main floor powder room and somewhere to put your coats and boots when you walk into the entryway, that is huge.
It's so huge. And you may not even be thinking about this if you're looking for properties in the summer where you're not thinking about your boots and coats. But I know for Ralph and me, especially because Ralph has like 7,000 jackets.
All black.
And we have like this
all black.
Literally has 1 million jackets, guys.
They
like
all
I'm
kind of
telling
look
you,
the same.
out of
Like,
control.
I never see Ralph wearing a jacket. We're all
they're all look.
What do you mean? It's summer. Of course you don't see me wearing them.
This is my point.
I wear them all the time.
Okay.
So we don't have a closet.
All right, we'll
in our
talk
back.
about this offline, Jess.
Yes, we will.
we have a bench system with hooks, and like literally it turns into like a mound in the winter because we're putting like a jacket over a jacket over a jacket till the point where the jacket just is like sliding off and it becomes one big pile of Ralph's jackets.
Damp. And it's damp too because it's winter and they don't properly dry. It's just this damp pile of blackness.
Oh my God. I know. You're always like, where's my jacket? I'm like, it's
in the
probably
pile.
in the jacket pile. So
Yeah. I have a similar situation going on in my place, so I understand.
Yes.
So yes, a closet and a powder room, amazing.
Mhm.
And I agree, Ralph, we did get feedback that the footprint overall was just smaller in terms of square footage. And then the last piece of feedback on this property is that the basement ceiling heights were pretty low. So I'm 5'5" and I could like walk down there, I think completely erect, and it was like fine. And I wasn't having to duck through any bulkheads or anything. But if you were Ralph's height, perhaps it might be a little bit more challenging. Jess and I would have no problem down there at all.
No jumping jacks for you down there though.
Yeah. No jumping jacks, no treadmill. This property got over 24,000 views on its Instagram reel, over 22,000 views on its Instagram post. We had over 17,000 views on Facebook. The campaign produced over 1,000 website clicks. And as I mentioned, we had the 56 net booked showings and 100 plus people at the open house give or say on Saturday and Sunday. And what was the outcome? That's what you guys all want to know. So we ended up with 3 offers on the property. And what's interesting about them in a competitive scenario is that the offers, I believe all of them, and Ralph, correct me if I'm wrong, had conditions in them.
Yeah, that's really unique.
We had, in a multiple offer scenario, all the offers had conditions. And this, guys, out there right now, I have not seen a condition-free offer in so long. I forget what they look like. So this is why it took a little bit longer to sell. When you see it online, I believe the days on market were 18 because we ended up having to sell it conditionally, and the due diligence period adds to total days on market. This property ended up selling for $1,525, which I think is just an amazing price for the buyer. Amazing price for the buyer. They got such a win. And it sold for 105% of the asking price. So any learnings from this property, Ralph?
There's a lot of buyers out there, especially in great locations, more so than you would think or expect in this environment. However, they are trending more and more conservative. And one of the things, and I don't believe it's necessarily a bad thing to have conditions on offers. I think buyers should be able to do their due diligence. And I think we're in a healthier market where that happens. But, things that I'm seeing as well is, and we've had this on multiple properties where we're now having to, so typically in Toronto, when you have a finance condition, they're typically 5 days. Those seem to be getting extended out now. I'm seeing extensions on those 5 days. And I'm also seeing far more conservative numbers. We're seeing activity on offer days, but we're seeing numbers that are below seller expectations or past market comparables. So again, that's interesting, going back to some of the challenges we're starting to see, or cracks that we're starting to see on the low rise, meaning semi-detached or detached side, versus some of the activity we're seeing on the condo side. Jess, I know you had clients through the property. What was your sort of high-level thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually toured 2 separate clients through the property. Both of them loved it. They thought that the key features of the home, like the main floor powder room, the closet, the proportions of the bedroom sizes were all fantastic. I think the real winner of this property in particular was the backyard. It was the star of the show with that pie-shaped lot. And you were surrounded by trees, and it just felt very lush and serene and private. And I think whenever you can have that type of privacy and a space to raise your family and entertain in a high density area close to the subway line and in a top school district, like, it's as close to winning the lottery as it gets in Toronto real estate. And I think that even though you got a lot of feedback that the property was on the smaller side, it was still a 3-bedroom, 3-bath home. And trying to find that anywhere in the city in this price point that is renovated, yes, you had to redo the roof and the windows, but it is very, very difficult to achieve. So I think that the buyers of this property scored themselves a tremendous asset that's going to appreciate really well over time. And I also had never quite seen a street like that, where you have essentially less than 20 homes on a little cul-de-sac, and you have this lovely community where everyone sort of watches out for each other and everyone knows each other by their first name. Like, those are things that you cannot replicate and necessarily place value on. I personally was quite surprised over the outcome of this property, but at the same time, I think it's really indicative of what we're seeing right now, where there are a lot of active buyers out there. That is not our problem. It's just they are coming to the table with a lot of fear. They're constantly looking for what is wrong in a property as opposed to what is right, which is conversations we've had a lot. And there is a real mental block for them to actually move forward with a property. And the only way that they do so is if it's riddled with conditions and a huge concession on price point. And that's essentially what we saw with this property in particular.
I totally agree with all of that. And the last thing I just want to add about Forsyth before we move on to Foxley, we've seen this pattern as well, is even when we've provided a pre-list inspection for potential buyers, most offers on low rise are still coming in with a condition of inspection, and the buyer is still wanting to do their own independent inspection, which costs about $700 to $900 depending on the size of your property. And then after inspection, requesting contingencies, whether it's that the air conditioner needs to be serviced or something needs to be fixed at the home or there needs to be a price reduction or what other additional findings their inspector might uncover. But I agree with Ralph's point and sentiment that it's probably good that the buyers have an opportunity to do their due diligence and everyone's moving forward with their eyes wide open and super confident about properties and everything is just worked out in advance. And we're not having to deal with these things at closing or after closing. And we want to have both parties, the seller and the buyer, super happy with their side of the deal. Yeah, it just makes it a lot easier.
One thing I want to talk about, I'm sorry for interrupting,
No.
but I just don't want to lose my train of thought. What you mentioned about buyers still including an inspection condition, even though there's already a pre-list inspection, I think some sellers may be listening to this and asking themselves, well, if that's the case, should I still spend $700 to $900 to have a pre-listing home inspection? And I think it's still very imperative that they are still doing that because you want to get ahead of any potential problems so that you're not caught off guard when a buyer goes and does an inspection and you find out that 6 or 7 vehicles need replacing.
Yeah.
I do think that that's an important point to reinforce is that, yes, even though buyers are still wanting to do their own inspection, I do still think it's in the seller's best interest to have their own done in advance. A, so you can really understand what you're working with. And B, it also gives you an opportunity to address potential issues before bringing the property on the market.
Completely. And with condos, I think it's really important that we order the status certificate in advance of listing the property so that we can get ahead of anything that might not be, that we don't know about. Like, oh my God, I had no idea that their reserve fund was at $0 or that there was, litigation against the condo corporation or there was Kitech plumbing or whatever else might be disclosed in the status certificate. So having that in advance so that we can do our due diligence and get ahead of anything is super helpful. We've always done that. That's always been the way that we've operated at Fox Marin. But even now, more than ever, we need to be proactive and start problem solving, long before we start even getting the property styled and photographed.
Yes.
All right. Ralph?
Oh, I was just going to say, if you're a realtor out there watching, pro tip, order the status certificate, spend the $100. You could save yourself and your client and maybe even a future buyer a lot of grief.
Yes.
Spend the $100.
Yes. And if you have to reorder it every 30 days, reorder it.
So be it.
You're going to be just fine.
Yes.
Totally agree. Well, we're going to shift gears. Jess, this is your baby on Foxley. Do you want to just give us an overview about this property and how things went down here at Foxley? Because I know this was a labor of love per se.
Yes, it was certainly a labor of love. This is a property that my clients actually purchased with me 6 years prior, so I knew it very well. And it was a really interesting exercise for me to witness how this property responded in 2 opposing markets. So when my clients bought it, this was not the peak of the market, but this was a period where there was a ton of competition. There was a lot of active buyers, and it was very difficult to acquire any property. Like, I think we submitted multiple offers before ultimately landing on this one, which we competed for as well. And so when we were making preparations to sell this property, I never anticipated that it would sit on the market as long as it did. But I was also still ready for potential challenges because we were observing the small changes in the market that were happening in real time. So this property was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, fully renovated property. In fact, the entire home was gutted from top to bottom in 2013. And at the time that it was renovated, it was meant to be a luxury renovation. So it wasn't the sellers that did the reno. They purchased it after and then did their own updates. But the individual at the time really spent the money on high quality materials, which is why even today it still looks fantastic. And a lot of individuals were surprised to know that the renovation was done in the year that it had. This was in an amazing location. You're in the heart of Trinity Bellwoods. You're right off of the Ossington Strip, but you're pulled back far enough where you're closer to Dovercourt, so you're not influenced by all of the noise and chaos on Ossington. And you're also one street over from a gorgeous newly renovated park just behind Body Alley Pizza, where all of the moms and dads and will gather with their kids, and there's a dog park. So it's pretty idyllic in terms of what you're getting. You're getting the city life, you're getting the neighborhood community vibe. But let's talk about challenges. So the house, like Forsyth, was on the smaller side. In fact, it was very similar in terms of its square footage. It was around 1,300 square feet above grade. And it did have a finished basement. However, the ceiling heights were on the lower side. It had a very deep lot, 130 feet. However, the lot frontage was on the narrower side. It was just over 14 feet, which is tough in Toronto, but in this specific pocket, all of the homes have the same lot size. Important context to have. It did have parking and a garage at the rear, which was huge because trying to park on that street if you don't have a dedicated parking spot is impossible. Just forget about it. We originally started off at a price point that myself and the entire team felt was very commensurate with value, but still allowed a buyer to come in and negotiate because we had flexibility beyond that. And when we first put it online, we're off to a bit of a slow start. And unfortunately, these sellers did not have the luxury of time to let the property sit and wait for the right buyer to come. And so we had to take very aggressive measures. And ultimately, we did $130,000 price drop because we needed to sell by a certain date.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I really want to talk about, because when we were priced originally on the higher side, the feedback was all very positive. It was, this is a great house, so much potential. The price makes sense to me, but the basement ceiling heights are not ideal. So we're just going to kind of keep it in the back of our minds and keep looking. But as soon as I reduced the price under 1.5, which targeted a whole different pool of buyers, primarily first-time buyers, as opposed to individuals that were already familiar with the inventory type of Toronto, that's when our challenges actually increased because we were dealing with a far more picky and entitled segment of buyers. Well, it's true. And so even though our activity in terms of showing went right up, I mean, we're on the market for a little bit over a month. We had about 50 showings. We did several open houses. They were all slammed. I mean, I didn't even have a second to breathe in between them. And we had about 5 agents almost submit offers and then ultimately weren't able to get their clients over across the finish line. Seeing these buyers pick this home apart was most surprising to me because at this price point, like you're always going to have some concessions to be made, but at this price point, like you're getting so much more in terms of the value exchange. And so I couldn't really fully understand that even though this property in my mind was basically being given away, that was not enough to overcome the objection in the buyer's minds of all the little things that they felt were wrong with the home. But when you actually get out there and see Toronto real estate, you're like, wait a minute, this is almost impossible to have anyway at this price point, if that even makes sense.
It totally does.
So in the end, even though we had almost 5 offers from 5 individual agents, we were only able to bring 1 across the finish line. It was a conditional offer. We negotiated for 4 straight days and fought for every single dollar. And we were able to get it done, thankfully. And the sellers are just so thrilled that they were able to cross the finish line in a market where most buyers and sellers just cannot come to a meeting of the minds. Contextually, leading up to this property, I was tracking a few homes in the area, homes that decided to hold an offer date. And all of those properties did not sell on their offer date. And so I knew that when we were coming to market, that was not the right strategy for us. So we did list with offers anytime, which was able to get us across the finish line. But I think when you talk about Forsyth, I mean, there's a real dichotomy happening in the market. We always say there's no such thing as a Toronto real estate market. There are submarkets, and each of those submarkets perform uniquely to each other. Is Forsyth was able to elicit offers on an offer night, but in this particular area of the West End, CO1 Trinity Bellwoods, that was not an effective strategy, which, so interesting to me how literally 20-minute drive can make all the difference in terms of performance.
One street over based
Yeah.
on school districts or a whole bunch of other factors. So that's very true. And I think we're seeing that more and more in this environment as things are changing and to a certain degree softening.
Yes.
And you were definitely challenged by some recent comparables that really dragged down valuation.
Well, I would actually disagree with that, because when you look at all the comparables, even the lowest comparable, if you were to measure value against those properties, we were still priced exceptionally well.
Okay.
So I think those comparables were a challenge for us when we're first priced at the price that we thought was commensurate with value.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bit of a changing, evolving thing. But the lowest comparable, which was a almost identical lot size, similar home, didn't have as much depth, and it did not have parking or a garage, which for anyone listening in the city of Toronto, just to have parking alone, you're adjusting $50,000 to $100,000 in value.
Yep.
And we sold for $15,000 more than that comp. And it was across the street from us. Everything was the same.
Right.
So that to me was very interesting, and very interesting that buyers refused to benchmark those comparables. It really just felt like, I'm not really going to listen to what the comps are saying. I have my own understanding of value, and that's what I'm going off of. And this is such an extreme opposition from what we saw when the markets were at its peak, where, again, buyers were not really looking at comparables, but they were offering numbers that were way beyond what was justifiable. Now we're seeing it below what is justifiable. So I think that's an important theme that sellers need to be aware of and prepare themselves for, because I think there's a lot of fear amongst buyers that the market is going to continue to soften and decline. And so they're factoring that into their decisions and giving themselves a little bit of a buffer so that even if things drop further, they're already insulated from that because they purchased the property at a lower price point from the onset. That's the theme that I'm seeing.
Totally agree that comps have seemed to have just evaporated and become irrelevant to buyers. And buyers are only willing to pay what they feel it's worth to them or what they can afford.
Yeah.
And so, if they can only afford 1.2, they'll offer 1.2 on a $1.5 million property.
Yes.
And then just see if they can make it work. And you know what? There's probably some instances that they might be able to make that work, to be honest with you. I mean, I think people are running around and just throwing pen to paper and seeing what works and doesn't work at various properties. I think something that you did that was really smart here as well is when you had people through the property, you were showing them where they could possibly put a main floor powder room, which I really liked how you marked up the floor plan. You're like, it'd be so easy to add a main floor powder here, and made that very easy for people to understand. I think that was showing the value or adding value to the property in the future. And I found for a row house that this property had tons of natural light, which I don't think a lot of row houses do. It felt more like a semi than a row house. And I think that was it's also a big win for the buyer. I think they did very well on price point.
Yes.
It's a great house, great location. And the fact that it has parking,
and it's a garage with laneway potential, there's just so much upside there. And I'm really glad that you brought up the bathroom situation. And part of the reason why I really hammered that home to potential purchasers is, if you look at any comparables in this neighborhood or all over the GTA, you will notice a very clear delineation between properties that have 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and 3 bedrooms, 3 baths. And there's a huge jump value-wise just to have that 3rd bathroom, because again, having a main floor powder room is incredibly rare, or having an ensuite bathroom in your primary bedroom also adds a ton of value. And so showing a buyer that they could spend the construction cost to add that powder room, which would be easy to do because the basement bathroom was right below it,
Mhm.
your return on your investment when you go to sell that property would be a no-brainer. So yeah, I had to get very creative with that property in more ways than one. We did, I think, close to 10 open houses on that property to try and get it across the finish line, including an evening open house during the week, which Kori and I both hosted with a fresh pie from Body Alley, which I think also helped get us across the finish
Oh,
line.
totally.
Shout out to Body Ollie.
Yes. No, we're so thrilled for our clients. I'm just so happy that they could close this chapter, move on to their next home. And I mean, that buyer is going to do very, very well, no doubt.
Yeah, you worked really hard on this, Jess. I'm so happy that this got done and your clients were just so great to work with and open-minded about everything in terms of strategy and working with you on all levels.
That's so important, right? Is like having that ability to collaborate with your clients and have that semblance of trust. I mean, we were having weekly strategy calls being like, okay, what else can we do? Can we change the staging? Can we change the photography? Can we change the copy? I mean, we really tried everything. And another thing that we did for this property to address the basement ceiling heights is we got written permission from both of the neighbors to underpin, because you cannot excavate a basement without having permission from both neighbors if you're in a row house. So we got that done. And then we also gathered quotes from underpinning companies so that we could take that first step for anyone that was like, oh, these basement ceiling heights are a little bit too low for me to get on board with. If I want to go forward with the underpinning, it's basically the path is being handed to me on a silver platter.
Always finding solutions to problems in advance. I love it. All right, let's move on to the last one of the day, which is a condo townhouse. So we're trying to give you a sprinkling of different property types that we've sold in July. Jess, this was under your portfolio as well. And this is for very VIP Fox Marin clients that we've been working with for years, and we adore them.
Yes,
And
we
I'm
do.
just so happy that you had such a success here. And I think this will be really helpful for our viewers to understand this property. And then don't let me forget to talk about how well your Instagram reel did on this property.
Oh, okay, yes. So this was a adorable condo townhouse, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, off of Stadium Road. So it's kind of in a little pocket that has this marina resort style type of living. It's in a cute little gated community. You're right on the water. You can literally hear the clinking of the boats, which is very charming. And it operates like its own little community over there. And in the summertime, you're right off of the Martin Goodman Trail. So you have all these runners and bikers, and it just oozes like active outdoor living. So it's very cute. So what I loved about this unit in particular is that it was an incredibly rare layout because this was in a stacked townhome development where most of the units were on multi-levels. In fact, you had to take stairs to get into the front door entry, and then another set of stairs to get into your living room, and then another set of stairs, and you're just climbing stairs all day. This was all on one level, which I always prefer. I think that to have the same square footage on one level and compared to a multi-level, you're going to get way more usable square feet. And the last time this particular floor plan came on the market was in 2014. So there's only a handful of them. And when people do get their hands on them, they tend to keep them for as long as possible. They also had 2 terraces, one on each side of the suite. So great outdoor space with views of the marina. Challenges in this property, even though it was all on one floor, being off of the ground floor, you did have some compromised light levels. And so what we did going into it to prepare this property for market is we did a slight reno/improvement to make the space look as bright as possible. So starting with painting all the walls a fresh white, changing all the light fixtures. This was also a slightly older condo development, so the kitchen was starting to show signs of its age. We had all of the cabinets refaced and repainted rather. The last part was to bring in staging that really evoked this beach, relaxed Marina style life. And it was incredibly effective because even though it was a bit of a slow burn, in fact, we only had 4 showings booked on the property, but the conversion rates were quite high here. So of the 4, 2 of them were starting to prepare offers, but one just beat out the second. And we were able to make it work at a pretty fantastic price point, especially given the days on the market, which was about 2 weeks. And this is a property that we anticipated might sit for a while, especially because it's not right in the core. I feel this area of the city, it's not the highest in demand. It's kind of like if you get it, you get it, but it's not for everyone. So I just really wasn't sure what to expect here, but I could not have been happier with the outcome for our clients. And I think the best part is that they were able to achieve a nice long closing because they haven't purchased something yet. And that is so valuable on its own, is that you could take your time, look for something, and then try to line up those closing dates, because anyone that has ever bought and sold knows that there's a whole other element beyond the purchase price that is of high importance, because it's tricky to line those dates up.
I think you did such a great job making sure that the staging was on point for the area. And I know you worked a lot with the stylist to swap things in and out and address things that might not photograph well or would speak or evoke the emotion that you wanted from the property. I think that you did an amazing job working with the photographer. And when the photos came in, I was like, oh my God, this looks so good.
Yeah. I did have to do a layer of micromanaging for this property, which I've learned from past experiences is always going to be to everyone's benefit. So behind the scenes, we did have to restage this property. They did a great job, truly. It didn't blend in with the context of the actual unit. And I think that's so important when you're thinking about how you market the property. It's not just about what's on trend, right? You have to think about how this blends in with the space. Is this going to tell the story that you need beyond what is trendy or what looks good on Instagram? Because it has to evoke a feeling. We did have to restage the entire place, which set us back a few days in terms of our target listing date, but it really paid off.
Yeah, it always does.
So I had to do like a whole mood board and just give like key points of like what colors I wanted to be used in the space, just to, again, make it feel light and airy and beachy, for lack of a better word. So I'm really happy that we went to the lengths that we did to make that happen, because I think it's so easy once all the work is done to be like, this is not quite what I wanted, but let's just run with it. I think now more than ever, you have to chase as close to perfection as you can, because you're only going to get one shot at it and you can't go back once you go online. So just really understanding how precious that opportunity is super, super important.
And remind me, was the offer on this property conditional of just status certificate review, or were there any other conditions?
It was conditional on status and financing.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And a condo townhouse, just so our viewers are clear. Yes. The thing that I thought was interesting about this is because I run our Instagram account. So if you guys are ever messaging on Instagram and you get a reply, it's always me that's talking. I was like, I just assume people know it's me, but I don't know. And sometimes people do, and they're just like, hey, Cor, and they think it's just my personal account. But if you message us on Instagram on Fox Marin, it's definitely me responding most of the time in the direct messages. And from the reel, I was getting a lot of people messaging me, knowing this little community from Porter, having flown in so often and seen it from the sky, basically, and looking down and saying, I've always wanted to know what those places look like inside. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it's a 2-minute walk from Porter, from Billy Bishop.
Yeah, the Billy Bishop location.
Yeah.
There's a story we have about Porter once. Like, I did not know that Porter flew out of Pearson. And so Ralph and I were like these morons that had a flight to go to Montreal. And I did not know that Porter flew out of Pearson. So please, if you have done this, please tell me that you're not the only ones that have done this. We just went down to Billy Bishop, get on our flight to Montreal. And they're like looking at us like, you're not on a flight. There is no flight to Montreal. What are you guys doing? And we're like, what? And they're like, you guys are flying out of Pearson. We're like,
since when?
Since when?
Why did we even have to look at our ticket?
We're like, what? Yeah, we were so confused. Anyways, we missed our flight and they had to rebook us on a flight later, like super late, like 11 o'clock at night, which is way beyond my bedtime. I was like tortured by this point. Like we
Out
took,
of downtown, at least.
pardon me?
Out of the downtown airport, at least.
No,
No, we had to go to,
No, drive to Pearson. I don't know.
it's awful.
it was a disaster. It was a total disaster. So the other thing I want to mention about the reel on this one is that it got really great views. It had 38,000 views, but it got 633 likes. That's so many on a video for us at Fox Marin. 193 forwards and 155 saves. So I just think it's interesting. So the reason that forwards are interesting is that this is showing that other people are sharing it with somebody. It's like passing information forward. It's a very strong form of engagement. And the fact that it was also saved that many times is just really interesting to me. It had a little bit of a slower burn in that it was advertised for 15 days versus some of our other campaigns that are only online for like 5 to 7 days until we do a new one. So I thought that was really interesting. And I actually shared those stats with the videographer because I thought that he'd find it really interesting that it got that many likes in comparisons to some of our other reels. And I really like the fact that you guys did the drone shots, really showing.
I think that's what was the tipping point for that video in particular is I felt it was very important to highlight the area because it was such a huge selling point of the property. So we did something a little bit different with this videography. We ensured that we had drone photography covering the area, but also the lake, just so you can really see the proximity of the running trails, the marina, the airport. And when you watch the video, most people were surprised to see that it was even in Toronto. It didn't look like your typical Toronto property. And I think that sparked a lot of excitement for people to think, oh, in the summertime, I could have this resort style living. Like it's great.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
And then the last thing I wanted to mention about this is a theme for all of our listeners. This property was also turnkey. You're going to see that more and more turnkey properties are selling. It's hard to sell something that needs renovations right now because people just don't have the capital, the cost to do a renovation, the cost for labor,
the threshold for risk.
And then the approval process, everything like that is just agonizingly painful. So we're just seeing this more and more as a trend in 2025. And it'll be interesting to see, as we were talking about before the podcast started, what is going to happen in the fall. Do you guys want to just quickly speak to that before we wrap up?
Sure. I think that we're in for a rocky fall. I'm just going to put that on the record.
Okay, put it on the record.
I think that in the summertime, it's really difficult to extract opinions because you are dealing with seasonal challenges. Most people are on vacation, they're at the cottage. But the part that concerns me about this summer in particular is just how much of a change we've seen in such a short period of time. And these are real precedents that are going to be referred to in the future. And as I said earlier, is that we're not having a problem that there's no buyers. There are buyers active and out there, but they're coming to the table with a tremendous amount of trepidation and fear and analysis paralysis. And so every benchmark that they see, they want to go in even lower than that. And so if that's a trend that continues, it's going to be very, very difficult for many sellers to get across the finish line unless they're willing to make concessions on price. And even then, it's not going to be a shoo-in. So I think all of the listing agents out there are going to be given a run for their money. I know we certainly already are, but there are still ways to circumvent that and to come out on top. But I think it's just really important to have realistic expectations and to always err on the side of caution and being more conservative than you think.
I love it. Ralph, what do you think?
I think we're in this really weird period where we had all these problems emerge in February where we had massive tariffs levied against us. And there were all kinds of promises made that these tariffs would be dealt with. that we'd have interprovincial trade open up, that we'd have all these mass projects come online. And here we are, mid to end of August. Not only are we getting tariffs from the US increased, China is now picking on us. All of these barriers for interprovincial trade, which were supposed to have been dealt with, I think, on July 1st, still exist with no movement. We have a non-sitting parliament and we have no budget, even though we were promised fiscal responsibility, I think, from an economist, with the same government that got us into this position to begin with, literally. So I think there's a lot of concerns right now because things seem to be getting worse, not better. And the uncertainty is just continuing. And I think in this environment, people are very much nervous and rightly so, taking a wait and see attitude. And so until these things fundamentally get dealt with, or until there's some type of demand by our population to see these issues get dealt with, we're going to continue to see a weakening of our economy. And I think when you have that combined with uncertainty, it definitely will weigh on the market. I do think that a bottom will form on the low-rise side, kind of like what we've seen to a certain degree with the condo market. And we've seen that start to bounce back slightly in terms of activity, both anecdotally what we're seeing. And if you look at the stats from July, it's also indicating a slight uptick in activity. And I think some sellers got caught in a shift on the low-rise side. And I think that's where generally when sellers or buyers get caught in a market shift, that's generally up or down where you see the biggest amount of movement. But I think going into the fall, sellers will be very cognizant on the low-rise side of the current market conditions and decide if they even want to sell or what their bottom line is. And I think the biggest indicator to watch will be inventory on the low-rise side. And if we do start to see a tightening, we'll start to see a bit of a bottom forming and potential bounce back slight on the low-rise side in condition with, I know all of the Canadian banks are saying there's going to be no more rate reductions. I don't know what's going to happen in September, but we are going to see a significant amount of rate reductions coming out of the US over the next 6 months to a year. And I do think Canada will be forced to follow suit. And if you look at our inflation numbers, well, now that we have the, what's that, the tax on gas, what was that tax
The
called?
carbon tax?
The carbon tax taken off, our inflation is at 1.7. And if you take out some of the housing factors in it, which should be taken out, in my opinion, we're at about 1.2. So the inflation narrative is no longer a narrative. And I do think we're going to see a lot of pressure on the Bank of Canada over the next year to come down significantly more than where we're at now. That's not a consensus view, but I do think if that happens, that will have an effect on the market, help solidifying prices and potentially starting to form a bit of a bounce back. But time will tell because nobody really knows anything. And nobody can trust any data anymore because everything is always being revised
Okay.
and redefined.
It's so true. Well, my prediction is going to be more of the same that we had this summer. The last 8 weeks, I would say, is going to be very similar to that temperature. And I just want our selling clients that are listening to this to know that we will fight for them.
Yes.
We will get you guys across the finish line. And there are lots of winning scenarios out there. And I think we just showcased 4 of them and why they worked. I'm looking forward to the challenge. I am ready for it. We are in the middle of just closing up a couple of negotiations right now, which have been an absolute grind. So I feel like nothing could be more challenging than this one particular one that I know that you guys know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know, Kori.
So if we can do that, we can do anything.
Yes.
It's true.
So I am looking forward to, we have some great properties in the pipeline, some fantastic properties. So I'm looking forward to pulling all the marketing together and the staging and the photography and the copywriting. It's my favorite part about what we do. I'm so glad we had such a productive conversation. If there's any questions or people want to know anything specific, pop it down into the comment section below. We're already braced for your negativity. Don't worry, we're ready. The YouTube armor is up. I'm ready. Ralph, any closing thoughts? Jess, any closing thoughts?
I think the biggest advice I could give to everyone right now is tread carefully, be conservative, and that whenever you have a market that is so influenced by human emotion, it's impossible to predict what's going to happen. And so just hanging on the edge of your seat and being ready for anything is really important, never underestimating or overestimating the market, as we always say.
The best advice that I could give is interview agents. This market environment, more so than any, requires really, really, really strong and solid representation, both on the buy side and the sell side. And we are seeing that more than ever in this environment. People will spend months planning a vacation, but hire the first realtor that they speak to. Do your due diligence, ask your questions, look for reviews, look for track record, ask really great questions about how they would handle specific situations and what value they can add to you in your process, because those are the ones who are represented, buyers, sellers, rented, by the best representation are going to be best served in such an uncertain environment like this. So do your research, do your due diligence. If you want to reach out to us, we're always happy to chat and give advice where deemed necessary. We want to thank everybody for joining us on this conversation today. We feel it's just important for people not just to see data, but to see actually what's happening behind the scenes. So thank you so much for sticking it out to the end. I forgot to ask at the beginning the request. Please be sure to hit that like or subscribe button, and any comments, as long as they're constructive, not necessarily positive. You can hate us if you want to. It's still a free country. So please be sure to make the comments down below. And we hope to catch you next week on the flip side. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.